So today we'll be doing a quick crash dive into building out UX portfolio through a quick workshop. We're going to modify it slightly today, which is really going to go over just like the high level kind of learnings and just ways that you can make portfolio building really simple. And so for those of you who are new to UX, a UX portfolio is basically like your resume. And what it does is it puts all the different pieces and the learnings into an artifact, essentially, on a website or these different recruiting websites, such as like Working, Not Working, Behance. And essentially, it's to show people who are looking to hire you as a designer, a UX designer, if you've basically been able to create the stuff that they're looking for. So same thing for a designer's portfolio. Basically, it's saying, hey, here are examples of things I've done. And if you like these examples, or if you want me to work on these things with you, then hire me, right? Cool. And so first and foremost, just want to recenter ourselves with the purpose of a portfolio. And so we talked about this is showcasing your work. We talked about this is your always on resume. So sometimes one thing to know, especially as we're investing time into things, is where can we put the time in that gives us the biggest payoff, right? And sometimes we forget that when we put all the stuff into a website, it's doing its job for us all the time. It's preaching us. It's putting this like big perspective on all the stuff that we're doing. Also, number three, interview cheat sheets. So more often than not, we use this as a way to basically talk about our projects and talk about all the thought that we had in thinking through the projects. And so one thing to think about is as you're working on the, oh my gosh, portfolio, I'm like, what is it called? As you work on the portfolio, one thing to think about is just putting all the stuff that you would want to talk about in your interview just directly on the portfolio so that when you're walking through the portfolio, you're hitting all the important points, right? Sometimes we forget it's the cheat sheet that's right in front of us. And then lastly, it's an opportunity to just really celebrate the work. And so a big part of sometimes what's really difficult about us working on the portfolio is this hesitation we have to put ourselves out in front of everyone. And instead of seeing it as a opportunity that maybe you're just like hard on yourself, just see it as an opportunity where you can just celebrate all parts of you and your creativity. This slide is really important. Portfolio is also not everything that you've done. And why this is important is number two, you don't want to put the things that you don't want to do in the portfolio, right? So oftentimes designers who are early in their career will put everything that they've done that's creative. And why this is hard is, let's say, for example, you put photography and you like photography, but you put UX design work. And then since your photography is much stronger, right, creatively, it doesn't necessarily help your UX do the justice of selling itself. And at the same time, you don't want to get an instance where a recruiter is seeing some of your stuff and going, you might as well get hired for photography instead. And so a big part of it, I always say, is put on the portfolio things that you want to be doing more of. Number three, we just want to be careful of not just putting other people's work. And why this is important is you also don't want to be caught in the instance where you're having trouble explaining what you did or what somebody else did because it wasn't yours. And number four, the really interesting part, especially with UX, and it sounds like a lot of us here are for UX, is that your portfolio doesn't have to be beautiful. Actually, for a UX portfolio, it's actually more technical and it's more of a science than it is beauty. And that's something that I think will make it just so much easier for us because oftentimes we're so worried about creating it. Also, it's not dev work either, meaning you shouldn't be creating this from scratch because, again, you don't want to show off the development work because this isn't the career that you want to go down. And also what I want to just put out there for anyone who's looking at different roles and figuring out where you want to go is at the end of the day, you just spend time, you just go after a role and then you just try it and you see it and then you'll learn more. That's the wonderful thing about life is you can always pivot, you can always learn. And why, especially us in our organization at QTBIPOC Design, why a lot of us do the work that we do is we acknowledge and we celebrate pivots. And we, like so many of us here, and we'll share a little bit about our story later, but we come from many unconventional backgrounds. And when we do, we bring and we infuse into whatever industry we move into all the stuff that we had done before. And so a big part of that is, how do you use your website to speak truth to the work that you've done previously? So today's goal, and then we'll modify a little bit, just understanding that we want to fit other things into the agenda today. But basically, we'll go through the base structure of a website portfolio. Not all the different pages, but really just the idea of creating the portfolio. And it's just so easy. For some of you who are working in portfolio, oh my gosh, why is this so easy? Which is great. And so we'll just really quickly go through this. Again, this is going to be recorded, put on the YouTube channel so you can take a look at it while you're creating portfolios in the future. So don't feel as though you have to take notes really quickly. Yeah. So with that, one really interesting thing, especially when we're creating, is this concept that we have two different modalities. This took me a long time to learn, but we have two different modalities, which is the editing mode and the creating mode. When we're in the creating mode, oftentimes this is when we are able to, and this doesn't have to just apply to UX, but this is to writing, to creating presentations, to doing just work. And when we're in the creating mode, this is when we're just putting stuff down onto paper. We're just putting words onto Google Docs, when we're just starting to put something down without the thought of having to refine or edit. And why this is important is because oftentimes when we start at the precipice of creative work, oftentimes we oscillate between the two so much to a point when we struggle to get to point A to point D, E, F, G, right? We're just at A to B and we're like, oh my God, that was so tough, because we're just oscillating like this. And the idea is, whenever we're in the mode of putting stuff down on the paper, first decide what type of mode that you're in, right? Whether you're in the editing mode or the creating mode. If there's nothing already put down for you, you obviously have to be in the creating mode, but you have to give yourself the space to just create, right? Create without judgment, creating compassionately, creating without the limitations of coming in with the sharpening of the knife or the editing, right? And how it relates to UX design is just putting stuff down, just putting designs down, putting comps down. How it pertains to portfolio is just putting the pieces into a Word doc and just writing out some of the things you learn. How it pertains to writing is just writing stuff free flow and not even going back to editing a sentence. How it applies to creating a presentation is quite literally putting slides together and then just throwing a bunch of words and just moving on. And why we really need this is because oftentimes we need this fountain of all this work to then edit, right? To then refine. But if we don't have anything to refine, then that's where we're just really struggling. And then so the second mode is the editing mode. And so this is where we take what we've done and we polish it, we refine it, we update it. As it pertains to portfolio, this is where we go and tweak some of the wording. We swap out images, right? How it pertains to writing is when we look at the writing with fresh eyes and then we go in to modify the words. And this is a huge, huge, huge productivity lesson that took me a long time to learn, is that the first tip is, especially when you're creating mode, you must give yourself that window to create and say, I will not edit. Yeah. And then when you're in the edit mode, just say, I am solely focused on editing. And when you can split those two modes, quite literally, you're going to have the best of both worlds, if that makes sense. Yeah. And you usually see this with people who are really great crafts people, right, with their trades. And they've learned to basically set these boundaries where they can oscillate between the two. But especially for people who are new into the creative space of any type of creativity, you find yourself, you're editing as you create one little piece and then you get frustrated, which is totally, totally normal. Yeah. Cool. And so, whoopsies, I don't know what happened there. But basically, the activities to create a website is fivefold. The first part is just collecting basic elements that you're ultimately going to put on a portfolio. Then you set the broad strokes. And so for this one is basically identifying what are the sections that you're creating. And then third part is then you fill in the gaps with additional details, right? So do you see what we're doing is number one, we are in the create mode, right? Number two, we are also in the create mode. Number three, here, we're in the editing mode, or we could be in the create mode as well. Number four is solely focused on just editing. And number five, this is just for today, but we're going to omit it. Cool. As a part of creating your portfolio, and we're just running through this so that we have time to go over some additional stuff, is the first part is just see if you can give yourself time to just collect stuff, right? Collect artifacts, collect documents, and see if you could just give yourself a moment, like give yourself a time where you could just grab everything you can together, save it into a folder, and don't organize the folder at all. You can do that later on. And this is just to pull everything together so that you are able to progress little by little. And then the second part is really starting with the broad strokes we had talked about. How do you create? Creating, just writing. And so the first part of this is just writing stuff out. How I recommend is a few parts. First, just writing in a Notion, Google Docs. I personally like to write on my phone. And why I will say is that I'll open up Notion through my phone and then I'll just write free flow is because I have Grammarly turned on desktop and it keeps editing my grammar. And then I'm just like, oh no, I'm stuck in this loop. And so sometimes I find that when I'm on my phone, I can't edit it. So this is also another way that I'm trying to set these boundaries where I forcibly have to be in the create mode. So one recommendation is, especially as we're creating a portfolio case study, thinking about what we have in the beginning, right? What are the broad strokes? So this is where you would list who was your client? What was the role that you took on? What did you do? What was the role of other people, right? What was the challenge that you're addressing? And what was the goal that you're trying to accomplish with it? And quite simply, when you create a UX portfolio, this just has to be in the very beginning, and that's it. Super simple, right? You don't need sometimes I see in the UX portfolio a whole like monologue in the beginning, sets like time and space. It's like, cool, but we don't necessarily need that. Also, the recruiter skims over that and they don't, they don't look at that either. Yeah, cool. And then going into the middle section of our portfolio case study. So this is where we grab all of the deliverables, and how we start organizing is first list out what were the final deliverable of each section, each phase. And so here are some examples of deliverables. And basically these are things that if you had to organize a folder of like the final things for your, your client that you're working with, what are they, right? So to create a portfolio case study, the really easy way is to first just grab one of each so far. So this really just takes a few minutes and just grabbing each one, but also start thinking about how you start categorizing, maybe bucketing some of these deliverables together, right? So that you can better understand like the broader sections that you want to create a portfolio. We're just skimming through this. And then the last part is then just answering the following. What did you learn? What would you do next? Yeah. And then I also have a Figma document that I'm going to share with the template that everyone can use that just like puts it all together. And so here is where you're just going to answer at the end of your portfolio some things that you learned, some things that you're going to want to do next. Yeah. And also, what I will share is you have to frame yourself in a positive light. So we do a little bit of career coaching also with QTBIPOC design. And in this, we talk about how we can succeed together as a community. And one thing that is truth is, especially for people in our community, what we share and what we say and how we talk about ourselves is not weighted the same as, for example, a cis straight white man. We can say one statement, they can say one statement, and it's taken very differently in the context due to socio-political, socio-racial stigmas that exist in our society. So with, I will throw in a few nuggets that we've shared in previous conversations, but for folks who are new, a good interview tip is a question, for example, like, what could you work on more about yourself, right? And oftentimes this is a trap, especially for people within our community, because while we can be very honest, the way in which we talk about the things that we're not good at oftentimes really hurt us more to the degree than like a cis straight white man if they said the same thing. Understanding that what's said in the space is taken very differently, but also understanding that here's a very interesting insight is that sometimes in a system of inequity, how people look at us, especially when we come from a place of lacking privilege, people are not seeking, especially when you're looking for a job or trying to align with a job, they're not seeing it as, oh, I can teach you this, but it falls conversely to that of, why do you not fit into this role? And so, especially when we sit at a axis of not having privilege, basically, whenever people can poke holes at our resume, or they can poke holes at things that will point out that we may not be a fit, those end up being the reasons why we don't go through. And so a big part of this is, even in the way we talk about our case study, we have to frame it in a positive light, or where do we want to go next, in a way that we can still address like the negative, but it's just really a diction shift, if that makes sense. So instead of saying, like, going back to the interview, is not saying like, what can you work on? Well, I'm just like late, tardy, everything. Like, it's just another way to frame it is just, yeah, I'm just really excited to just take on a lot of stuff. And sometimes my schedule gets overloaded with so many of these meetings. I'm working on just trying to prioritize many different things that I'm taking on. So I mean, we talked about the same thing, but different lights. Same thing with the UX case study is, please don't be critical about your stuff and your designs to your interviewer. That's like big, 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 big tip. Like, we can still have and hold space for improvement, but we also don't need to be critical of ourselves when other people are coming in to be critical of us in the beginning. So what we can say is, if I had additional week, this is how I would have invested that additional week. Or we're just saying, this is what I would have done differently. Additionally, you can say, what did you learn? But in the context of, what would you do differently to better uplift the work? Cool. Awesome. And then, quite simply, so now that we've gathered the broad strokes and we were just going through the creative flow of things, basically all we do next is we just go through and add the details. It's so simple. So now we've gotten the broad strokes of those questions answered. We just go into adding additional notes into specifically each deliverable that we've created. What did you learn? What was your takeaway? And how did this get you closer to the goal? So it's basically just like a candy bar. You're just filling in all the marshmallow in between. Yeah. And I'm going to quickly just go through this so that I can go into the Figma doc and just guide everyone through it, and then share the Figma doc out in a sec. And then see if you can give some additional time for last minute tweaking, last minute retouching, and then going into just creating it. And so I think that's what we have. Yep, for the case study. And I'm going to hop out into the Figma document real quick. How many of you are familiar with Figma? Not yet?
I am.
Oh, okay. So cool. So we'll send this link out for you all, but basically we're trying to create a template that we're going to start sharing more of. We'll be working on this together as an organization. And so what we can do is, here, we'll just copy this link and send it out to folks. Cool. So everyone can hop in, check it out. A little bit of preface of just like the design industry. So softwares are always constantly changing. And right now, the most important software to learn that a lot of products are adopting is Figma. And so this Figma document is basically showcasing, There you go, you can edit it. A lot of things that we can do, but why Figma is really important right now is particularly because of a few reasons. The first reason is this collaboration feature, right? The ability for me to send this link and I can design in real time with you. This was not a reality as of 5 years ago, really. And so Figma really revolutionized this, kind of similar to how Google, right, revolutionized Google Docs for word processing. So why this is really amazing is because you're able to collaborate in real time and then have people not have to deal with what we dealt with in the past, which was versioning, having files stored locally. And so Sketch just recently announced their collaboration feature as well. And so right now, if I had to really recommend software that everyone just picks up and learn is really Figma, especially within the UX realm. Yeah. Some people will say, learn Sketch, learn Canva, like all this stuff, but just being in the space, like Figma will give you more job opportunities, quite simply. Yeah. So invest your time into Figma. What I will also say is hold it loosely. Yeah. The realm of design also changes with the software. And the thing is again, like don't get too stuck on the software. Similarly, it doesn't allow you to be more flexible into the future. So again, like there are a lot of designers also still doing a lot of stuff in Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign. And those people are just ones that have really just like held onto the software so tightly. Again, there's so many purposes for so many of these different products, but my recommendation is learn it, get really familiar with it, but also hold it lightly. And this will help everyone, especially succeeding in the design industry, hold it lightly so that you can be more open to new software in the future. Yeah. Cool. So with that, we also have, for anyone who's new, Figma training tutorials in our YouTube channel too. So if you want to brush up on Figma skills, you could definitely check up on some of them. It's kind of the shortcut to learning some Figma for many of them. And so some of them do a really great job. It's just like a crash course. Cool. So really, this is a simple template for a portfolio case study. And so really for you all, like feel free to take this, use it as you may, replicate it, copy it. At the end of the day, portfolio is really more about a science of how do you put the right pieces together. And then when you have everything, you can focus on the creativity aspect, right? But when you don't have the data points that people are looking for, people don't pay attention to you at all and won't give you the job. And then myself, I've been in many positions of hiring other designers. I look for first and foremost some of these really articulate precision pieces. So what we talked about was at the very top of the portfolio, right? You have your little attributes around setting up the project. Sometimes people like to explain a little bit of who the client is, especially when it's not a familiar brand, for example. And so if it's a smaller brand or a niche brand, it might be really useful to use one of the sections. Feel free to use maybe the challenge section, then talk about the brand and maybe talk about the challenges. But really the main idea of any case study is forming the challenge and goal, right? The challenge is really the important piece here is anchoring us with the reason to be, right? Which is, why is this client even engaging in this project in the first place? I see this missing in so many projects. And so really this is just the opportunity to list, what have you heard, right, from the client? What issues are they struggling with? And really this is to help frame the problem that this project ultimately is going to solve. And then the goal, so we just created this like Mad Lib style right here. Feel free to use it. I think it just like simplifies it tremendously to build X, that Y for Z, who are ZX. And so it's quite simply, this is the hypothesis or the kind of the milestone of where we're trying to go. I'm trying to build a product, a website, application, whatever it is, that, and then here's your hypotheses, right? And what's a science part is this solution or hypotheses just ladders up into the challenge, and that's it. It's so simple for users. And this is just recentering, right? UX, user experience. Who are you solving this for? And then you just list out the problem that they're going through. And why this is really useful structure is this lists out all the important key pieces that you just want to hit on with all these different phases. And so going through the simple structure of this portfolio, the next thing you want to list out are just the phases of this project, right? You can call it strategy, you can call it ideation, you call it whatever you want. But the idea is the bullet points. These are the deliverables that you created, right? It could be wireframes, designs, but ideally you want to segment these out into chapters, right? And then lastly, we just have each of these sections. So you'll have the pillar headline, and then you'll have each section created with an image. And then basically you just need a headline of what this is, like what am I looking at? And then talking a little bit about what you did, how did you do it, and what did you learn? And sometimes if you want to break it out into like these takeaways, you can have these like little bubbles here. And quite simply, that's it. Awesome. Thanks, Kripa. Yeah, that's it as a part of the portfolio. And if you can hit on all these pieces, and just repeat the same for each artifact, persona, journey, wireframe, design, then that's better than like 50% of all the portfolios out there. And that's it. And then at the end, you just have a section that says learnings and takeaways, and then things that you would do maybe next time you're running this project. Yeah. So this is here for you. Feel free to use it as an organization. I think we're going to try to refine this a little bit more. And so stay tuned. We'll have version 2, version 3, where we just create these templates for people. I think this will be a really, really great resource for our community, especially thinking about all the amazing work that you did. I think it's just really having a structure to put this into. Is this helpful for people? Yes. It's quite literally a formula to put in a portfolio. Yeah. Yes. No, maybe so. Yes. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. I mean, just take this. Like my thing is, and this is what I talk to people in the community is we need to do a better job of standing on each other's shoulders. And so I know you can all create it from scratch. I hear that. I hear that. But take it and then build upon it. Yeah. Don't feel as though, I mean, the system also pressures all of us in our communities to have to like start from scratch. Like you have to do, but ultimately at the end of the day, take this and then build on top of it. You can still differentiate it, do as what you may, but really ultimately we want to set everyone up for success and being just really mindful and cognizant with the time that you're spending. So hopefully this will help kind of guide and give you that shortcut to just like get this done and not have to worry or beat yourself up about it. Cool. Awesome. Any questions, thoughts, comments, concerns? And then we'll go into the second part of today's event. I know this is a little different from what we initially had talked about, but just wanted to hit on a bunch of stuff for different people attending tonight's session.